Blackhawks with a disastrous opening 40 minutes in Dallas as they drop both games of their midweek back-to-back.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Real quick, do me a favor, be sure to go and hit that like button. Comment down below as well. Mailbag Monday is right around the corner, Blackhawks fans, so make sure to drop your Blackhawks-related question down in the comment section below. You can also DM me on any one of my social media channels or even email lockedonblackhawks@gmail.com. Be sure to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube as well. Really closing in on my goal of reaching 2,000 subscribers, but of course won't be able to reach that goal without your help. Thank you very much. And last but certainly not least, got to let you all know today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Be sure to go and download the Game Time app and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $20 off to the sporting events, concerts, or theater events near you. All right, good morning, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Real quick before I dive into segment one, obviously, as I'm sure most of you have noticed by now, at least the folks who are regularly watching over on YouTube, going with an audio-only version episode here today, as still very early on in the morning and I'm going to be traveling, so not having the video hooked up right now, but did want to be sure to get an episode out for you following the Blackhawks' second consecutive loss in the last 2 days. And quite honestly, there was like some deja vu going on last night at American Airlines Center as the Blackhawks nearly had the same performance as they had 12 days ago in Dallas for the first meeting, as third period surge after a pretty disastrous opening two periods wound up falling short as they lose 3-1 to the Stars and drop both games of their midweek back-to-back. All that good work they did over the weekend on the West Coast to wrap up their 5-game road trip on a high note is now all for naught as they give both games right back, which is super frustrating, and fall to 5-9-1 through their opening 15 games of the 2024-2025 NHL regular season. And honestly, they were lucky that this was a close game. They were lucky they had a chance in the final few minutes, because as far as what went wrong, it was the opening 40 minutes. It was awful out of the Blackhawks. And it's been a common theme that we've seen from this team really for the greater portion of this season, even in their wins, especially the ones over the weekend. Neither were pretty performances for the Blackhawks. And listen, they don't always need to be pretty performances. Not every win needs to be pretty. But when you're getting this inconsistent of efforts consistently, if that makes sense, it's definitely concerning. And it feels like it's really the same issues that are plaguing this Blackhawks team right now. Slow starts, barely any puck possession until, they finally play with desperation in the final period, taking bad penalties, no 60-minute efforts, which I think is the most frustrating part, because in this league, you can't take any nights off. It doesn't matter who you're facing, especially when you're, a struggling team like the Chicago Blackhawks. There aren't any easy opponents where you can go, oh, okay, we can kind of ease into this one, guys, and we still should come away with 2 points. No, that's not how it works in the NHL. And for the Blackhawks to, I can't even really name one 60-minute effort off of the top of my head through these first 15 games. And for that to be the case, certainly concerning that this is consistently happening to the Blackhawks. But the opening 40 minutes were really what did them in. Let's look at some of the numbers here at 5-on-5 that were in favor of the Stars. Dallas led 55-19 in shot attempts at even strength through the opening 40 minutes. They also led 24-11 in shots on goal, 24-8 in scoring chances, and 12-3 in high danger chances. So absolute domination out of the Dallas Stars. And the Blackhawks defense really didn't have any answers for their offense. They were stuck in their own end the entire time until they finally willed themselves into the offensive zone in the final frame. As far as how it stayed close, it was all because of Arvid Soderblom. He was outstanding, and that's now been the case in 3 of his 4 starts this year while he's been filling in as the Blackhawks backup with Laurent Brossoit still out. Look at some of these numbers for Soderblom this year. Well, in this game alone, he stopped 27 of the 29 shots that he faced through 40 minutes. He was getting absolutely peppered, but was standing on his head, wound up stopping 37 of the 39 shots that he faced on the night. Also stopped 33 of the 35 shots that he faced in his season debut in Winnipeg. Gave the Blackhawks every opportunity to win that game. They unfortunately blew it late and wound up losing in overtime. Soderblom also stopped 38 of the 40 shots that he faced in Anaheim. And now this, 37 of 39 last night. And even in his other performance, the 4th game that he started this year, that was a game in which the Blackhawks deserved to win. And you can't really blame Arvid Soderblom. He had one tough goal that he allowed in that game, and that's really been the only tough goal he's allowed this season. The Blackhawks defense was just really solid that night and limited Buffalo to only 21 shots on goal. Soderblom stopping 18 of the 21 that he faced. Doesn't look analytically all that great, but that game certainly wasn't his fault. So 4 pretty solid performances out of Arvid Soderblom where he gave his team a chance to win in all of them. Last night against Dallas, over the weekend in Anaheim, he got his first win of the year, played good enough to win in Winnipeg, and played pretty good still in that loss that he had against the Buffalo Sabres. So credit to Arvid Soderblom. Been awesome to see him play tremendous. I know there were a lot of Blackhawks fans over these last couple of years completely writing him off. This kid is still only 25 years old, and a young 25 years old. Just turned 25 back in August, and for a goaltender, that's still relatively young-ish. So this is why you just got to be patient with players sometimes, and you should not quit on them too early until you absolutely know. Give them opportunities. Don't cast them off until you absolutely know what they are 100% for sure. Has to feel good for Arvid Soderblom. Going to be very big for his confidence moving forward. Not 100% sure if that was his last start up in the NHL before Brossoit returns. But if it was, man, a lot of credit to Arvid Soderblom for really responding well after a pretty nightmarish campaign last year up in the NHL. The Blackhawks special teams was also pretty good to keep this game close. The Hawks went 1 for 3 on the power play. That's how they scored their lone goal of the evening, and also went 3 for 3 on the penalty kill. PK really did a good job of giving them a chance in this game. Nick Foligno with a ton of great work while shorthanded, drew a penalty to negate the Blackhawks penalty kill. Power play wasn't the prettiest night, but they got the finished product when they needed to on one of their chances in the 3rd period to give them some life down the stretch. And then it also stayed close because Tyler Bertuzzi keeps on making an impact. The lone goal scorer for the Blackhawks last night, his 5th of the year. He now has 3 goals in his past 5 games, so really starting to get it going after a slow start to his Blackhawks tenure, which happens from time to time. It takes a little bit for guys to find their footing, establish their chemistry with one another, especially a new guy coming into this situation. So good on Tyler Bertuzzi for responding really well these last few games. A beautiful mitts display, nice finish after a nice feed from Connor Bedard on the power play. Got to score more goals like that. If we can find ways to get Bertuzzi the puck right in the dirty areas, not only is that a good way to score goals by just getting the puck on net and hoping your big man can get a piece of it or cash in on the rebound, but also if you can make Bertuzzi very dangerous in the slot, that's going to open things up for the playmakers at the dots and on the outside. So good on Tyler Bertuzzi for continuing to play better hockey in the past couple of weeks. But yeah, the opening 40 minutes were just too much for the Blackhawks to overcome. And you can't start a game against a team like the Dallas Stars on the road in their own building, one of the top teams in not only just the Central Division, but the entire Western Conference as well. You can't just pick up and start the game in the 3rd period. And it seems like the Blackhawks aren't learning their lesson, which is another concerning part of it that's consistently been plaguing them. They're not making adjustments to it. And some of these signs, Blackhawks fans, point towards Luke Richardson, point towards the coaching staff, because they're not able to make these adjustments and get the players playing right together. And we see this lack of energy out of the gate far too often, or taking a period off far too often. Screwed them last night. Can't pick up and start the game trailing 2-0 with, 10, 15 minutes left and expect good things to happen to you. Also, what went wrong for the Blackhawks? The Connor Bedard line just continues to not get any high dangerous looks. The puck possession is okay. They're on the outside. They're moving it from time to time in the offensive zone, but they can't get the real dangerous chances right now. And the frustration is clearly mounting on Bedard, even though he did pick up a point last night with a primary assist on Tyler Bertuzzi's goal. You can just tell the lack of finishing. He had another opportunity to score a goal last night, had a semi-breakaway opportunity. What's the word I'm looking for here? Prevented by Asa Lindell with a really strong back check, and the frustration clearly mounting on Connor Bedard. A dumb penalty last night on Ilya Lyubushkin. One of those plays you see like a 16-year-old kid who's frustrated make. Lyubushkin has a stick fall to the ice, and as he goes to pick it up, Connor Bedard kicks it away from him and gets an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. That's how you can tell that things are boiling over right now for Connor Bedard. The possession numbers were okay last night, but when he was on the ice at even strength, the Blackhawks were outchanced 4-11, and they didn't generate a single high danger chance opportunity last night. So still getting Bedard quality looks has been an issue, and that's something you can kind of point to Coach Luke Richardson to as well. Like, we got this kid who's super talented. We just can't get him the right line mates or in the right situation to really break through and get over the snake-bitten hump that he's in right now. So a lot of frustration last night for the Blackhawks. One step forward, one step back here in the middle of the week after some really good momentum that they established over the weekend when both games out on the West Coast, 3 of their last 4 during the 5-game road trip. And as I mentioned off the top, all for naught as the Blackhawks take a big leap back here before they return home over the weekend. But there are my quick takeaways from the Blackhawks. 3-1 loss to the Dallas Stars last night at American Airlines Center. Coming up in just a moment, I'll take a look at some of the bigger picture takeaways from the Blackhawks through 15 games, and we'll also touch on the Blackhawks head coach Luke Richardson making some forward line changes. But first, real quick, I got to talk to you all about Game Time. Hockey season is officially taken over, and it feels so good to get back down to the United Center here in Chelsea Dagger, grabbing a cold beverage and enjoying the atmosphere at the Madhouse. And I'm sure many of you Blackhawks fans out there are antsy to get back to the UC just like I was, and that's why I have to tell you all about Game Time. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks, which makes getting tickets to your favorite live events, not just hockey games, even easier. And I personally have used Game Time since I was back in high school. It's always been the cheapest and easiest way for me to purchase all of my tickets, whether I'm going to see the Blackhawks down at the United Center, the Cubs down at Wrigley Field, or if I'm traveling and just want to go to a sporting event and see any team in any city. They also have views from every seat in the venue, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Plus, last-minute tickets, flash deals, and zone deals so that it's easy to find in my tickets now that hockey season is about to take over. I highly recommend you all go and download the Game Time app, and when you do, create an account and use the promo code LOCKDOWNNHL in all caps to get $20 off with your first purchase. Again, you can get $20 off to come and see Connor Bedard at the United Center this year. All you got to do is download Game Time and use the promo code LOCKDOWNNHL in all caps. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Game Time. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just wanted to say thank you all real quick for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start your day. Now for your second listen, go and check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast so that you can become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. And you can easily find the link to Locked On Fantasy Hockey down in the description, or simply search on YouTube and wherever you may be listening to your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Segment 2, I did want to be sure to quickly share my thoughts on the new look forward lines that Luke Richardson rolled with last night. And during my preview episode that I dropped yesterday morning, I did mention that we could possibly see some changes to the lineup based on the way things have been going, and that's precisely what happened. We saw Connor Bedard get loaded up with Taylor Hall and Lukas Reichel on the Blackhawks top line last night, but not a very good night statistically for that trio in their first game together at even strength. The shot attempts were 6-20 in favor of the opposition. Shots on goal were 3-9. And as I referenced earlier, scoring chances at even strength were 4-11, and high danger chances were 0-4. I think this line has a lot of good pace and can be very deadly in transition. And Lukas Reichel continues to play with amazing pace. He just has these couple of bursts that you can tell are special. And I don't think there's anyone else on this Blackhawks roster outside of maybe Andreas Athanasiou who can skate the way he does and get up to that high level of speed and blow past players in transition. We saw it a couple of times last night. I think Taylor Hall plays the same style and plays with good speed, and you got to get Bedard some more speed so that they can capitalize in transition more often. But one thing that's just kind of been apparent whenever Connor Bedard's been away from Nick Foligno this year is there's been a lot of trouble in terms of winning the loose puck and winning face-offs and just overall puck possession. It feels like when Bedard's out there this year and he's not with someone who has some size, who can go and win battles, and they can go and dump the puck in when he's out there and have someone to go into the offensive zone and win it back for them to get he and whoever he's playing with possession on the dots to try to generate something in the offensive zone. It just hasn't worked. And that's why I do wonder, and I've mentioned this a couple of times on the show, this isn't a new idea or anything. I feel like it's time to get Tyler Bertuzzi a look with Connor Bedard. And funny enough, those two connected for the Blackhawks' lone goal of the game on the power play last night. And I just think that that goal was a perfect encapsulation of what the Blackhawks need to do more of. Get pucks to the dirty areas and hope their big men finish in front. And Tyler Bertuzzi has the hands to finish those types of goals. And again, if you start making the slot a weapon, defenses are going to have to respect it. That's going to open things up for everyone else who's out there on the ice with Tyler Bertuzzi. So to me, I would have liked to see Bertuzzi, Bedard, and Reichel, or Bertuzzi, Bedard, and Hall, because I just think you got to give 98 someone with size and skill out there to kind of help him. He needs a little bit more help out there right now. And, you know, Hall and Reichel, are other guys who can lug the mail and carry the puck through the neutral zone to help out Bedard in that way. I like having one of those guys with Bedard, one of those two guys with speed, and then also give him a Tyler Bertuzzi, a guy who can crash and bang around and try to win some of those loose pucks. So that's personally the tinkering that I would be doing. We'll see if that transpires in the Blackhawks' next game against the Minnesota Wild on Sunday, which, by the way, stick around until segment 3 of today's episode. I will have a way too early preview of that matchup between these two Central Division foes. Bertuzzi played with Philip Kurashev, who was back at the center ice position. Teuvo Teravainen, despite his struggles over the last 8 to 9 games, was bumped back up to a top 6 role. This was the best line of the night for the Blackhawks by a pretty handed margin. Unfortunately, they didn't get a ton of time at even strength because there were 6 penalty minutes for both teams in this game, and Bertuzzi, Kurashev, not penalty killers, and at the moment at least, Kurashev's not on the Blackhawks' top power play unit, so that kind of cut their ice time down a little bit, but in the short time they had at 5-on-5, and I think Luke Richardson has to give them more time at 5-on-5 moving forward if he does stick with this trio. They had pretty good numbers. 6-5 shot attempts at even strength, 3-3 in shots on goal, 3-2 in scoring chances, and 1-1 in high danger chances. You know, things are pretty sad when that's the best line of the night for the Blackhawks, but it was. They had some good puck movement. Bertuzzi's goal obviously came on the man advantage, but they had their chances, and that was pretty much the story in the game prior against the Detroit Red Wings as well, that Tyler Bertuzzi's line was the primary driver. he's had his legs these last couple of games, so I would give him an opportunity with Bedard next time out against the Minnesota Wild. Third line for the Blackhawks last night, Nick Foligno bumped down to the third line and was removed from the center ice position with Kurashev going back. He was back with Jason Dickinson and Joey Anderson, who, as I mentioned in my preview lineup, I said I feel like this could be a time for Joey Anderson to regain the lineup. Well, exactly what happened. This line didn't put up any special analytical numbers or anything, but again, as the shutdown forward trio for Luke Richardson, they spend a lot of time in the defensive zone and don't get many offensive-minded situations, so that's just kind of the nature of the beast. But what I will say is when they were out there at even strength, they held the Dallas Stars to only 2 high-danger chances. So you love to see that out of your shutdown trio. And then the fourth line last night, Ilya Mikheyev bumped down to the fourth line. Ryan Donato bumped down to the fourth line and playing the center spot. Craig Smith remains playing the right wing. That left Pat Maroon as the odd man out from the forward group as well, which I thought was, interesting. But I mentioned this also could have been an opportunity for Andreas Athanasiou to get back into the lineup. And I think I would have liked to see Athanasiou with Donato and Smith if you were going to go with those two together on the fourth line. I think I would have rather given them some speed and offensive game rather than what Ilya Mikheyev provides. Yeah, he does have some good wheels, but doesn't really give you anything offensively. And I mentioned in the preview episode as well, I actually thought Mikheyev would come out of the lineup and Anderson would jump onto the third line. And then Pat Maroon would jump out, and I had Andreas Athanasiou jumping onto the fourth line. Maroon did jump out. Anderson jumps in. Mikheyev just wound up staying in the lineup. I would have gone with Andreas Athanasiou on this line personally and had him get his first game since October 24th, I believe. It was either the 19th or the 24th against the Vancouver Canucks. It's been a while for AA, and getting to some bigger picture takeaways here from the Blackhawks as we are now 15 games into the season and starting to get a pretty decent sample size. Clearly, the Blackhawks just lack speed. They don't have enough of it in their lineup. A side effect of adding all these older veterans and not addressing the center ice position whatsoever. And it's really making the Blackhawks have a hard time of getting quality scoring looks. These last 4 or 5 games, they have not generated many high danger chances, not even just at even strength, on their power play as well. And it's because they're having a hard time winning battles when they have to dump the puck into the zone, and they don't have enough speed to be uber dangerous in transition. And that's why, again, I was shocked we didn't see Andreas Athanasiou get back into the lineup last night with a major need for speed in the Blackhawks forward group. It's so clear, and it's honestly pretty prevalent on the back end as well. TJ Brody, super slow. Connor Murphy's pretty slow. Alec Martinez, when he has been healthy this year, looks like a shell of himself in terms of the skating department. So yeah, that's really, really clear in terms of the bigger picture takeaways. The Blackhawks do not have enough speed in their lineup. Center depth is also still a major, major issue. And Luke Richardson's he's having to keep tinkering with who the center icemen are on this team. Sometimes Lucas Reichel's playing center. Sometimes he's playing wing. Sometimes Philip Kurashev's playing center. Sometimes he's playing wing. Ryan Donato was up on the top line these past couple of games until last night as the right wing with Connor Bedard. Last night he was back down on the fourth line playing the center ice position, right? Like there aren't any consistent centers for this Blackhawks team. The one that has been consistent is the ones that have been consistent, I should say, have been Jason Dickinson and Connor Bedard. And Bedard's 19 and like 33% at the faceoff dot this year. And the Hawks won only 16 of 56 draws last night against Dallas. Think about that, Blackhawks fans. Dallas went 40-16 at the faceoff dot last night. Absolutely dominated the Blackhawks, who are one of the worst faceoff teams in the entire NHL. And here's the even more frustrating thing about it is even if the Blackhawks were right, assuming about Frank Nazar that he was going to make the team's opening night roster out of training camp, he still would only be 20 years old, and I'm sure he'd be having his share of struggles at the faceoff dot right now as well. So, like, the Blackhawks center ice depth as of right now could be, if Frank Nazar was in the NHL, it would be Connor Bedard, Frank Nazar, Jason Dickinson, and Ryan Donato / Lucas Reichel on the fourth line. I mean, that is not very good center ice depth for the Chicago Blackhawks, and the lack of kind of the comprehension or understanding of that in the offseason seems to have completely eluded them. But yeah, dominated at the dot, and that's why they're also having a hard time just getting a lot of possession, getting a lot of quality chances in the opposing zone. It's because they're not playing with the puck enough, because they're not winning a lot of faceoffs. So yeah, lack of speed, lack of center depth, the two biggest holes in the Blackhawks lineup that have been very clearly evident through these opening 15 games. Also, I would say they've been concerningly outpossessed and outplayed for a fourth game in a row, and that's been a common theme here early on in the season. There haven't been a ton of blowout losses. There haven't been a ton of games where the Blackhawks had no chance, but there also haven't been a ton of games where their performance was damn good. I think that game against the San Jose Sharks, the home opener, and the game against the Edmonton Oilers early on in the year are the only ones that really stand out to me. Because, like, even that win against Colorado, I wouldn't say it was damn good. It was a damn good third period to hold on, but wasn't a damn good 60 minutes. Wasn't a damn good 60 minutes against LA or Anaheim in their other two most recent wins. So it's like the underlying game and the play of this Blackhawks team, it's concerning right now. And again, that's another sign that points to the coaching staff. So feels like something's got to give here for the Blackhawks. Big game coming up next as they return home on Sunday against the Minnesota Wild. I'll go over my preview of that matchup here in just a moment, but real quick, one final break to take on today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. Real quick, I got to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action in the second half of the regular season with FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and win $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. And the FanDuel Sportsbook app now gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So that when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can go and check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you also happen to place your bets. And the Chicago Bears, it has been a tough stretch for the Monsters of the Midway. Heartbreaker against the Commanders, disastrous loss to the Arizona Cardinals. However, they are at home this weekend on Sunday. You know, Matt Eberflus can't win on the road, but he can win at home, and they're playing the New England Patriots. So if you like the Bears' chances of bouncing back, be sure to go and check out FanDuel.com right now. And if you're not already a member, sign up, and you'll have the opportunity to win $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet cashes. Again, that's FanDuel.com. Create an account, and if your first $5 bet wins, you'll be blessed with $150 worth of bonus bets. So never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Before I get into segment 3, just a quick reminder that Mailbag Monday is the next episode of Locked On Blackhawks, so be sure to drop your Blackhawks-related questions down below in the comments section. If you're listening through an audio platform, you can also easily DM me on any one of my social media accounts or even email lockedonblackhawks@gmail.com. Segment 3, I know we are still well over 48 hours away from the Blackhawks' next game, as, believe it or not, Blackhawks fans, I went and looked at the schedule. Aside from the NHL All-Star break, this is the only weekend where the Blackhawks, for the entire season, do not play on either Friday or Saturday. And with that being the case, I perfectly timed out a nice little trip for myself over the weekend. So will not be around over these next couple of days, but I did want to be sure to give you all a little bit of a preview of the next matchup against the Central Division foe, Minnesota Wild, who have been real busy here these last few days. Just played last night out in San Jose against the Sharks and beat them 5-2. They'll be back in action here tonight, Friday night, still out on the West Coast, taking on the Anaheim Ducks before traveling to Chicago and taking them on at the UC, 6 p.m. Central Time puck drop on Sunday afternoon. But what a start it's been to the year for Minnesota Wild. My boy Seth Topal, the host of Locked On Wild, has to be ecstatic with this 9-2-2 start through the opening 13 games. That's currently good for second in the Central Division, behind only the red-hot Winnipeg Jets, of course, who the Blackhawks should have beat in their own building in their home opener, but that's a story for another podcast episode. But yeah, the schedule doesn't get any easier for the Blackhawks, and I referenced that a couple of days ago. Why letting that game against the San Jose Sharks go really, really stung, and why it was so important for them to win those games at home, because the schedule doesn't get any easier. Tough game on the road in Dallas, then they return home against one of the best in the West, the Minnesota Wild. And looking at some of the numbers here for the Minnesota Wild, breaking down their season thus far, they're 11th in the NHL on the power play. Biggest weakness for them thus far has been the penalty kill. 30th out of 32 teams, Blackhawks, of course, cashed for their lone goal on the man advantage against the Dallas Stars last night, so hopefully they can capitalize on the weak link of this Wild team. And as far as goals for and goals against go per game, Minnesota's inside the top 10 in both, which tells you the sign of a real good hockey team. 8th in goals for per game, 5th in goals against. And looking at some of the individual player stats, Kirill Kaprizov, arguably the MVP of the league early on in the season, the leading scorer for the Wild, and second in the NHL with 24 points thus far, 7 goals and 17 assists. He has been on fire, but Matt Boldy, Matt Zuccarello, and Marco Rossi all also are in double digits. Boldy with 15 points, Zuccarello with 12, and Rossi with 11. So some pretty good scoring depth inside the top 9 for the Minnesota Wild that the Blackhawks have to be aware of, and both of their goaltenders as well. Philip Gustafson and Blackhawks legend Marc-Andre Fleury both have been strong out of the gate. Not entirely sure which of the two is going to get the start in Chicago, but I will note, I know Fleury started in San Jose last night, which will set up Philip Gustafson, obviously, to go in the back end of the back-to-back. That could possibly mean Marc-Andre Fleury gets the nod between the pipes in his return to the United Center on Sunday, but still a possibility that Philip Gustafson, their true number one, could get the go as well. As far as what we can expect to see out of the Minnesota Wild lineup, Kirill Kaprizov, Marco Rossi, and Matt Zuccarello have been the top line for the Wild here early on in the year. Marcus Johansson, Joel Eriksson-Ek, and Matt Boldy work as the second line. Marcus Foligno, as the Foligno brothers, will be battling one another for the first time this year on the third line with Freddie Gaudreau and Ryan Hartman. So as I mentioned, pretty good depth in the top 9 forward group for the Wild. And then Yakov Trenin, Kuznetsov, and Jakub Lauko round things out on the fourth line. On the back end, Jonas Brodin and Jared Spurgeon, as they've been for years, paired up with one another on the Wild top pairing. Jacob Middleton and Brock Faber, who were together for most of Faber's phenomenal rookie campaign, remain together once again on the second pairing. And then Declan Chisholm and Zach Bogosian expected to round things out on the third pairing. Looking at some of the numbers between these two teams in the last handful of meetings has not been very good for the Blackhawks. And I referenced this in the preseason. 20 consecutive losses to the Minnesota Wild for the Blackhawks in the regular season and the preseason combined. As far as the regular season goes, the Hawks have lost the last 12 meetings against Minnesota dating back to the start of 2020. They didn't beat Dean Evason in his entire tenure as Minnesota Wild head coach, which is, truly unfathomable. So, gonna have their hands full in a game they really could use on home ice on Sunday afternoon, especially when they've lost 4 games in a row at the UC since taking down the San Jose Sharks in their home opener. I expect the Blackhawks forward group to probably be the same as it was last game. Even though Luke Richardson has clearly been tinkering lately, I think you got to give some time to pass in order to give these guys a little bit of chemistry opportunity. So I think Taylor Hall, Connor Bedard, and Lucas Reichel will be together once again. If they're not, though, I would really like to see Bertuzzi get up there with either Hall and Bedard or Reichel and Bedard, but expect that trio to remain the same. Expect Bertuzzi, Kurashev, and Teravainen to remain with one another since they did have a pretty good first game together. Nick Foligno, Jason Dickinson, Joey Anderson. I'd anticipate that being the third line. Wouldn't also be stunned if Mikheyev got moved back up there and Anderson became a healthy scratch once again. Maybe Pat Maroon gets back in there on the fourth line with Donato and Smith. Maybe Anderson stays on the third line. Mikheyev stays down there, and Richardson rolls with the same 12 forwards. Personally, though, I'd give Andreas Athanasiou a shot, man. I know he hasn't produced literally anything when he's been in the lineup this year. He has no points. But the Blackhawks need speed. They need speed so bad. And Andreas Athanasiou, he's got that. He can provide that for sure. So I would like to see him in the lineup, but don't have high hopes whatsoever that that's actually going to be the case. As far as the blue line for the Blackhawks, expect to see Kaiser and Jones, Vlasic, Murphy, same top four. Maybe Isaac Phillips gets back in there for Nolan Allen, or maybe he gets in there for TJ Brody. I probably expect Brody to remain in there after being healthy scratch for 3 consecutive games. He was fine, I guess, last night in Dallas. Will be interesting to see if Nolan Allen comes out potentially for Isaac Phillips, or if Alec Martinez will finally be ready enough to go to return to the Blackhawks lineup for the first time since the 4th game of the season. And last but certainly not least, even though Arvid Soderblom has been phenomenal, fully expect Peter Mrazek to get the nod between the pipes in this one against Minnesota in a game where the Hawks really could use 2 points. All right, that is going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. That way, you can get the latest episode as soon as it becomes available each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me on X at Jack Bushman 2, but be sure to go and follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. So until the next episode, which is Mailbag Monday, again, go and drop your Blackhawks question down in the comment section or DM me, email me at lockedonblackhawks@gmail.com. Until then, everyone, enjoy the rest of your weekends. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.